Our next speaker is Jennifer Hanzlick. She is the founder and CEO of a company called Clutter Trucker, and she is a hoarding expert. Her word is compassion. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was called to meet Jim. He has a long history of failed home inspections and fines and upset neighbors. The city has given him 7 days to clean up his home, and I'm there as his last attempt to see if I can help. His caseworker tells me that he hasn't left his home in over a year, and that his sister has been bringing him food and putting it on his doorstep. She won't even go inside. And as I approach his house, I see the sign. It's posted on his door. It says, "Danger, unsafe. It is a crime to enter this building or remove the sign." And I take a big breath, and I smell that familiar smell. It's a mix of rotten food, feces, mice droppings, and I'm hopeful that he even answers the door. He hasn't been very cooperative lately, and that's because the stress of this situation has made him physically sick. And the thought of having someone come inside his house, look at his things, and remove them is terrifying to him. And then I hear the rustling on the other side of the door, and he squeezes through the narrow entryway, and he shuts it behind him. Jim is a heavy-set man in his late 60s. He has a Santa Claus pot belly. He has a beard. He has really swollen red feet. He's not wearing shoes or socks. But I smile as I shake his hand because I notice he has a clean white t-shirt, and his hair is wet and it's combed, it's slicked back. With all this filth, he's still trying to make an attempt to present well to me. And so we go and we sit on the porch, and he tells me, "I don't know how I let it get this bad." He says, "I wish they would just give me the sign instead of putting it on the door for everyone to see." He says, "I've tried to clean it up so many times, but I just can't make any progress. And that the neighbor kids threw rocks at my window, and I've been afraid to go outside." He says, "I was seeing a therapist, and then I stopped. And with all the stuff piled high against my walls, it's actually helping to insulate it because my furnace is broken, and I can't get it fixed." And that makes complete sense to me. I ask him, "Can I go inside? I just need to get an estimate for the cost to see what it would take to get you some help." He says, "Yes, and I'm sorry for what you're about to see." He stays outside. He can't come in. He doesn't want to see my reaction to his stuff. And I know this has to happen fast, so now I'm inside. I shut the door. I'm stepping over piles and piles of clutter. I'm hanging on to the wall so that I don't fall over. My eyes are scanning the room, taking an inventory of everything that I see and I smell. And I make it to his bedroom, and I see just the corner of his bed, and the rest of it's filled with boxes and cans and wrappers, and he's sleeping on trash. And then I make my way into the bathroom, and I see several Ocean Spray cranberry juice bottles, but it looks like they're filled with apple juice. And then I see those bags that his sister had brought his food over in, and they're full, and they're piled high in buckets. His plumbing is broken, and it's urine and feces. And some people see this as being gross and disgusting, but I see it as being resourceful. It's survival. I hurry back outside, and now Jim is sitting there, and his tears are coming down his face. I know it felt like a lifetime. I tell him, "Jim, it's okay. We got this. We could do this in 7 days. This is not that bad." He looks at me. He's crying now. "What do you mean it's not that bad?" I say, "I see this every day, and I've seen much worse." He's crying now. I tell him, "We can do this." He says, "You are my angel. When can you start?" I started the business back in 2008. I was laid off from corporate America. This was when the banks were failing, the CEOs were still getting bonuses, and the government was bailing them out. And the thought of going back to that environment made me physically sick. I decided I was going to take the summer off and find my passion. And so then my mom calls. And she says, yeah, meet me at Grandpa's house. We have to clean it up. He's in the hospital. And we just need to make sure that it's okay for him to come home and make sure that it's clean. This is before all the TV shows about hoarding that people are so fascinated at watching. But we show up, we have no idea what we're about to see. We open the door, it's floor to ceiling stuff with a little narrow pathway. It took us 3 months and trucks and dumpsters and garage sales and a lot of emotional conversations to get through that. And one day, I showed up at the house, and I said, Mom, I'm going to use my severance to buy a dump truck and start a business. And she looked at me blankly. You said, you're going to do what? So, yep, I'm going to start my business. I'm not going back to corporate America. I want to help others who are faced with this situation. Little did I know how many people are faced with this situation. So it's estimated that 2 to 5% of the population is suffering from hoarding disorder. That's 150,000 in the Denver metro area. There are more people suffering from hoarding than Alzheimer's disease. That's 1 in 20 of us. But you wouldn't know it because they're hiding silently behind closed doors with their blinds pulled down, afraid to come out. So when I tell people what I do, I usually get this response. You should see my wife and her closet full of shoes. I think she's a hoarder. Or, my grandparents lived in the Depression era. They never throw anything out. I think they're hoarders. But just know, hoarding disorder is a serious mental illness, and it has public safety implications. That it's only been diagnosed as a disorder since 2013. So it's lacking research, it's lacking resources, and it's lacking treatment. There's 4 parts to the definition of hoarding. You have to meet these 4 parts. 1, it's an excessive accumulation of stuff. 2, difficulty discarding your possessions, and sometimes trash. Living spaces cannot be used for their intended purpose. So you can't use your stove, your kitchen table, or sit on your couch. And then lastly, it causes distress and impairment. So I usually tell that man, unless she meets all these 4, the wife is likely not a hoarder. And then I get do you just take everything and throw it out and declutter? But it's much more complex than that. There's such shame and stigma and words associated like crazy, lazy, dirty. But I know my clients better than that, and they're smart, they're funny, they're engineers, and they're mentally ill. They're ashamed, embarrassed, and afraid. And I can completely relate. When I was 19 and in high school, I was a statistic. Teenage pregnancy, an unwed mother. And to make matters even more dramatic, I had twins. And to make matters even more dramatic, the father of the twins was abusive, he was black, and we lived in rural Texas. One night, in a scene out of a movie, I found myself trying to escape from Texas to Denver for safety. I had 2 babies, 6 months old, 1 diaper bag, and 500 miles to go for safety. I was on a Greyhound bus. My heart was racing. It was guilt-ridden. How did I let it get this bad? I'm shaking, I'm afraid, and I can't control my breathing. It feels like somebody is sticking a knife down my throat and choking my chest, my throat, when I'm trying to hold back my tears in public. The babies can't comprehend what's going on, but they can completely sense and feel my fear, and they won't stop crying. And then I hear the people on the bus, and they're frustrated, and they can't sleep, and they're angry, and I hear the whispers, and I get the glances. And then, out of nowhere, a white man dressed in army fatigues comes, and he says, Can I help? And he takes one of the babies, and she immediately falls asleep on his chest. And then he takes the other baby, and she immediately stops crying and falls asleep on his chest. And I don't remember his name, but this is what I remember him saying. He says, "Your babies are beautiful. My wife, I'm headed home to see her, and she's black. And if we have babies, they may be as beautiful as yours." And then he left. And I will never forget that moment. 25 years ago, it has stayed with me for the rest of my life. I know what one small act of compassion can do to help change the course of someone's future. I know what one small act of kindness can do. It can last a lifetime. And I know what it's like to be judged. What would our culture be like if we stopped judging one another without hearing our stories? Everyone has a story. Can we get curious and relate to the story before making assumptions? You will likely find more similarities than you will differences. Judging is a reflection of yourself. It's a mirror of inadequacy. So you may not know what it's like to be suffering from hoarding disorder, but I bet you know what it's like to be embarrassed, ashamed, or afraid. So pay attention this week as you go through your interactions and see if you can see yourself when judgment comes up. We all do it. I know I do it, but just having that awareness is one small step in the right direction. Abe Lincoln sums it up nicely. He says, "I do not like that man. I must get to know him better." Thank you.